Okay, the lighting's kind of harsh in this motel room. It's got my face. I might need makeup.
You're as handsome as ever. Well, hallelujah. We got a full house tonight. We had someone else and I guess they got scared. They were logged on. I was like warming up the video, trying it out. And it was like, the name was like Mrs. Speddy, Speddy. And I said, hello, Mrs. Speddy, how are you? And then all of a sudden I heard scrambling around and next thing you know, it just went, but she was on for like a half hour watching the video. So I was just running it in the background because I wanted to get a little precursor to what we were going to have tonight. But it was funny. I know that other woman that was on last night, Diane, she had been on before like that also and came in a flash and left. She was nervous. She thought that, that there was sneaking into her living room, or she couldn't grasp the concept of being on a voice conference or a video conference. So it's interesting how people respond to technology. I know there's so many scary scenarios that run out there with your camera on and peeping Tom all night long, in your house and spying on you. But people take it to the extreme. They get fearful. It's funny.
Yeah, I work on computers a lot and I help people. And a lot of older people, of course, some of my grandkids look at me and they think I'm older. I'm 64. I'm 64, so I guess I'm headed up there.
Hey,
but I've worked with people. And they're real nervous about, a lot of them are real nervous about it.
Yeah, they get nervous. It's funny. Well, we're going to do, we're going to continue on with this Breaking the Silence conference, which incidentally was an awesome conference. And I think I have the website still. Let me just see if I can, because I would like to share this Breaking the Silence conference, Breaking the Silence conference. Let's see if that website's still up. It was a conference that happened a while back, and Andrew was in it. It was in Colorado Springs, and there was 18 guest speakers. This is it here. This is their page, The Power of One. And what they did in this conference is have a week-long, and they brought in all these guest speakers from all different parts of walks of either government, also security, homeland security, government. And the idea was that Christians just seem to be real quiet and don't really like the idea or tend to shy away from getting involved with social things that are in the news, things that are national security, things that are of government. Even school systems. It's shocking to me how Christians don't speak out in schools. To me, that was just, I always had a problem with that when my kids were younger, because they all went to public school. And I would go to the parent-teachers meetings. I would go to the principal's office. And the school system, believes me, is doing some strange things when it comes to what they do with our kids. But nevertheless, this is a conference just trying to take some action and show people how they need to know about these things, because they're involved. And we, as Christians, we're involved, whether we like it or not. Because technically, as the light upon the hill, the salt on the earth, we're influencing society either positively or negatively. There's no standing still. So what you're doing in influencing has to be placed in a godly manner and in a scriptural manner. And some people don't know that. They don't know what that looks like, because the Bible's dated from hundreds of years ago or thousands, and there's no relativeness to some of those things. But the Bible, and David Barton is a wonderful person to resource to talk to, talks about every single thing from your income taxes to euthanasia to you name it. It's in the Bible in one way, shape, or form. And it's referred to, and it's there, and it's for us to know and it's us to know what to do, because there's action. That, you know, you can't just be a hearer of the word. You have to be a doer of the word. And this is the doer part. And breaking the silence is an apropos name, because it talks about the idea that a Christian feels they need to be quiet about these things. So I want to get started with the video because it's a long one. I don't know that I'll play the whole 107 minutes of it. I think during the part of the video, as we get towards the end, or get to a point where I feel it might be good to take a break from what they're saying, because this is a roundtable discussion. There's going to be 4 speakers in this discussion, and I'm going to show you who they are. Obviously, Pastor Mark Cowart, who is actually now heading up the 3rd-year business school for, I should say, the School for Practical Ministry and Government, and that this is where he has been appointed to direct that school. So he's the pastor in charge of this, or actually like the guest pastor, or the host, I should say, for this meeting. We're also going to hear from this gentleman, Kaleem Salim, and Kamal Salim, and I don't know if I'm saying his name right, but this guy is a former jihadist, and he's an author of a book called The Blood of the Lambs, a former terrorist memoir of death and redemption. This guy brings a perspective to this roundtable discussion that's just shocking. I don't know what other word to use. He talks about things in a way from firsthand knowledge of what it meant to be a jihadist and to be involved with what, I don't know, we use a term in America, and Donald Trump says radical Islam, that people won't say it. There is no Islam but radical Islam. There's only one Islam, and it's all radical. But, you know, the idea behind Islam and how he perceives and understands Islam, you're either in Islam or you're not. And there's no in between. And if you're not following Islam and you got one foot in and one foot out, you can switch at any moment. It's just a matter of what weather it is. And there's no in between, really. This whole idea of a peaceful Muslim nation just doesn't make sense. It's like jumbo shrimp. It's an oxymoron. So let's just say he's going to be here. Also tonight we're going to hear from General Jerry Boykin, who's very much well-known Executive Vice President of Family Research Council. But General Boykin has all kinds of national and international experience dealing with the government. And he's going to bring his inside information from Capitol Hill and the things that he's been privy to and what he knows. It's going to be interesting to hear his perspective. And we're also going to hear from, this is a former FBI agent, and he is founder and understandingthethreat.com. Okay, it's an organization dedicated to providing strategic and operational threat-focused consultation. But this guy was involved directly with many investigations. He was a U.S. Army Ranger school. He's been involved with the military at all different levels regarding terrorism. So he brings a really unique perspective as well to this roundtable. So having said that, I'm going to go ahead and get right in and get started. We'll just open up in prayer. Heavenly Father, we know the state of the world. We know that there's a spirit of Antichrist that abounds. We know that you say we should know of the ways of the devil. Not to meditate and not to think so much. This is not to conceal fear, but this is to conceal awareness. Awareness to the level that we can gain understanding that you would have us have. We want your understanding to these things. We're going to hear from people. We're going to hear from secular world views. We're going to hear all different types of information about what's going on in the world. But we want to be able to discern and rightfully discern this word of truth, to understand how to deal with this truth and help us to glean this revelation understanding from people who are at the front lines dealing with it every day, and let us know more and feel boldened as we walk this out in the world and lead ourselves down the path to do what your will would be, and that our calling and our destiny should be involved in what way, shape, or form, that you will guide us and the Holy Spirit will direct us. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's take a look at this is number 2, breaking the silence discussion panel. I'm going to put this on full screen.
Discover the power of one.
I think I am. I can get my clicker to work. Come on, clicker.
Discover the power of one.
There we go.
For most of you, General Jerry Boykin and Kamal Salim don't need any introduction. They're regular guests here. They're like family to us. They are family to us. We love and appreciate them so very much. I think the greatest thing, if you don't believe in miracles, please just look up here on the platform. And it is a true statement. General Boykin felt the call to be in the military and spent 37 years there. Counterterrorism was a huge part of that. Kamal Salim, a jihadist raised from a young man in a large Sunni Muslim family. And his mother told him that his destiny was to die killing Christians and Jews. So what do you do when your mother's telling you at 4 years of age? These two men were sworn enemies. And had they met at the wrong time, they would have killed each other. And today they are brothers in Christ, redeemed by the blood of the Lamb, and it's a beautiful thing. And John, are you going to, okay, great. John, it is so great to have you. I think it'd be great if you could tell people what you do. I know understanding the threat, but what I shared and have been sharing with the church, we're not getting the truth off what is called the mainstream media about radical Islam. I feel like I know a thimbleful of what I probably need to know, but I feel like radical Islam is playing this nation like a musical instrument. So, John, can you tell us some of your background and how you ended up doing what you're doing, and then we'll get on with discussion.
Yes, thank you, and thank you for having me. I really appreciate the fact you all are here. This is a joy. I am actually, for the last couple of weeks, have been traveling. I was in Arizona with a lot of law enforcement folks, training and teaching them, and then spent the last week literally going on a deep dive with a bunch of folks so they can go out and actually teach and do a little bit about of what we do. So understanding the threat teaches leaders at the national, state, and local level, law enforcement, about the real threat that we face and unpacking the depth of the threat in your community. And as we'll discuss here, you have a significant threat right here in your community. And most people aren't aware of it. I grew up in Maryland. I went to the Naval Academy. I graduated in 1989, took a commission in the United States Marine Corps, the finest fighting force the world's ever known.
Now, if y'all know General Boykin, you know where this could potentially go tonight. So, fair warning.
So I've known Jerry a while. So I spent about 7 years in the Marine Corps, was an infantry and reconnaissance officer, and in 1996 joined the FBI and spent about 12 and a half years as a special agent. And through a couple cases that I worked right after 9/11, came to see the Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas, Al-Qaeda network in the United States. And we were making a lot of mistakes inside the government. And so I started actually trying to get training and operations designed to actually go after the threat. And in the end of 2008, was recruited by the Department of Defense to do a strategic analysis of the threat. And that's where I stayed for a few years until the current administration defunded everything we were doing. And so I started in the summer of 2012, understanding the threat, specifically targeting two groups of people that I think are the most important at the local level, which is where we're going to win or lose this entire war, is sheriffs, because they're the most powerful law enforcement officers in the country, and pastors. And I'll just say this is stepping out, and then that's anybody that's been to any of my programs, you'll hear us and the team say that we have most pastors in the country not only are not speaking out against this, they actually believe that the God of Islam and the God of Christianity are the same, and they say it, one God, three Abrahamic faiths. And if you're sitting here tonight and you don't know that that's untrue, you're woefully behind the power curve. And hopefully we can help you untangle that and let you see that we have some real problems in this country. Because it's not only, if you here don't understand that and you don't understand the threat in your community, that's probably okay because you're a citizen. But we have leaders who have sworn oaths to the Constitution that don't know the threat, and for a lot of reasons, or they know the threat and aren't doing anything about it. So that's the work I do now, and we go around the country working with state leadership, local leadership, national leadership, and there is a door now opening at the national level that has not been opened since I've been doing this work, and people are asking the right questions. And I mean literally just in the last couple months. So that's at least a light. So that's it. Thank you for letting me do the intro.
John, and thank you for what you do. I guess we could start here. There's a lot of spin when you turn on the television and stuff, but let's just start here because some people think this is people overreacting. We're being fanatical. A lot of Muslims are peaceful Muslims. Is there a plan to destroy this nation? Is there a plan to take over this nation by Islam?
Oh, I'll start. Yes. First of all, I think we need to start with what Islam teaches. Islam comes from the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad. And if you just look at Muhammad, everything he did was the perfect example. So why do Muslims step into a mosque with their right foot first? Because Muhammad did. Why is it okay to marry a 7-year-old girl? Because Muhammad married a 6-year-old. Why is it okay to kill non-Muslims under the certain conditions outlined? Well, because Muhammad did that. And he beheaded people himself, and he killed people. And he authorized people to be killed for slandering him. So if you want to know why Muslims go to Garland, Texas to kill people because they're having a cartoon contest, because Muhammad said that's what you're supposed to do. And the Quran said it, and he said it. He's the perfect example in everything in life. So if he did it, it's good for all time. So it's kind of as simple as that. And he said, fight and slay the unbelievers until they testify there's no God but Allah. The Quran says it, fight and slay the unbelievers wherever you find them. And since they teach it in every Islamic school on the planet, in elementary and junior high school, that should be an indicator that that's what Islam is. And I would just leave these maybe as two good starting points. In Islam, from the Quran and the Sunnah, you get the Sharia, the law that Muslims are commanded to obey. And somebody who doesn't obey the Sharia that you might know, that's not a different version of Islam. That's just somebody not obeying the Sharia. And that's what the Sharia commands. And two things that I think are important to start the discussion with is one, this part of the law. It is a capital crime in Islam for a Muslim to teach another Muslim anything about Islam that's not true, and it's obligatory for Muslims to lie to non-Muslims when the goal is obligatory. So if you want to learn about Islam, you need to not ask a Muslim, you need to look at what they are teaching each other when you're not around. And that's what I do with leadership and with law enforcement, and we use their textbooks, everything from junior high to elementary school textbooks to authoritative Islamic law, and it's all the same. And once they see that, then when we understand that there's actually a Muslim Brotherhood network in the United States, and we do have their documents that the FBI recovered that states that they're here to wage civilization jihad until this country is overthrown and Islamic law is imposed. And they lay out how they're going to do it, the organizations that they're going to create. And since the 1990s, when they published those plans, they've actually created those organizations, thousands of them here. So they're actually doing the plan that they say they're going to do in furtherance of what they say they're doing it for. And our response at the federal level is to say this problem has nothing to do with that. And so if you think we can't lose, I guess not to start out on a dark note, but from a military side, looking at a war, because this is war from their perspective, I don't know how you win it if you decide to stand on the sidelines.
Well, we're Westerners. Kamal?
I was commissioned to send here. That was the plan that I was sent for. Not to be equal to you, but to rule and reign and change the culture. And the way we're going to do it is by deception, to deceive the culture. The hadith by Muhammad traditions, he said, when you are weak as Muslim, laugh in the enemy's face, but curse them in your heart. But then there are thousands of young men like me that were trained specifically for something like this, and they are here as sleeping units. We came to fulfill the Great Commission of Islam. Brother John talked about it, is when Muhammad says, Inni umirtu an uqatil al-shu'ub, I've been commended by Allah to war, to destroy humanity until everyone says there's no God but Allah, Muhammad, his prophet. But the other part that nobody talks about is, he said, if they do not concede to you, you have the rights to their women, to their children, to their home, to their land, to their finances, everything they own, it is your inheritance. So when you see refugees come into the United States, just like we saw what happened in Maryland, this little boy, 3 boys raped that 5 years old girl, and they did things to her, it was unspeakable. And you see the thousands of rapes, in the Middle East, in Europe. What happened is, this is prescribed because the Quran says whatever your right hand allows you to do, it is your rights to fulfill, whether to have a slave, whether to conquer, whether to kill. So they are coming for their inheritance. So we came for our inheritance in here to establish Islamic civilization. And our way to go about it is to go after your children, after your professors, after your politicians, after your bankers, after your judicial system. This is where you establish Islamization. You don't go to the people, you go to the high places where the mountains of influence can affect the nation. So we steer the nation from the top, and this is what the Muslim Brotherhood does.
General Boykin, your time in the military, you had to study. We played a clip from you last year promoting this, and you said in the infantry, you never go out to war without studying your enemy. What's your perspective of where the United States stands now in our threat of Islam and how well we know the enemy? From your military background, how do you see us as a nation?
First of all, look at, let me go back to a couple of things here and kind of come into this answer here. America is only less than a decade behind Europe, and if you're not aware of what's happening in Europe, you need to be. You need to go to YouTube. You need to go on the web and you need to find out what's happening in Europe, where Europe has been willfully blind about the actuality of the threat on the continent of Europe, and now it's catching up with them. And now it's out of control. They just elected a Muslim to be the mayor of London. All of you understand that?
Yeah.
The mayor of London now is a Muslim. Muslims are doing atrocious things all over that continent, and we are, I would have said a decade ago, now I say 5 years behind them. It's happening in America.
Just to interrupt for a minute, this idea of a mayor in London who is now a Muslim, they're also enforcing what they call it is female circumcision. They're actually moving into this area as well when they're going to degrade women now. This is where they actually create, and this is all happening in Europe. This idea of what's happening in Europe, and there's even people in Parliament now that wish they never, ever gave the 10 years ago. Well, we're about 10 years behind them. So it's been a little bit more than 10 years ago, but they wish they never allowed half of this stuff to come in with this Muslim infiltration, because it is super, super bad. A friend of mine's daughter went on a wrong train. She was just visiting Europe with her friends. And she got off at the wrong station and went back to get to another train, and was brutally raped and molested and brutally doing nothing. And European authorities, European police, they cannot do anything. The gentleman her father went all the way to Europe to try to press charges and find these people, and the police told him flat out, no, she was where she shouldn't have been. We don't have any authority there whatsoever. I mean, literally, these are these no-go zones. And you're going to hear more about this here later. But this is just really something that is completely real, and that not many of us insulated Americans really know about.
Because we're making the same fundamental mistake that they made, and that is we're not calling these people what they are. We're doing the same thing in America. If you don't know your enemy, you sure can't have a strategy to defeat your enemy, and America does not face up to the realities of who the enemy is, because we don't want to offend anybody. And John said something very important, and that is that calling the enemy out ought to start right in the church with the pastors. You find another church, I challenge you to find another church that will do what we're doing right here, right now. It's not happening because the pastors are afraid they're going to offend somebody. We don't know the enemy. Oh, we do. We know the enemy. But the reality is the leadership of this nation at various levels absolutely refuses to acknowledge that we are headed in the same exact direction that Europe has gone, and we're going to wind up in exactly the same place. And
just as these things come to my mind, I'm going to use this opportunity, because you can watch this in its entirety at your own time, because this is a long video, and there's some points as they come up that I want to just mention things. Jesus warned, and I should say Paul warned, and I think it's in John actually, that there is a spirit of Antichrist very much alive and well in this world. And he warned for us to understand that that's available, that's there. And he also told us about they'll be in the church, and they'll be in society, and they'll be in places, and it's a spirit of Antichrist. Political correctness, the entire term and everything it stands for, and the origin, and anything according to hate speech or hate crime, that it goes back into the laws of our country. Anything that is associated with it is nothing more than a suppression and an allowance of a spirit of Antichrist to flourish. It is just an endorsement of a spirit of Antichrist. That's something that the church, the Christians, that people need to know. This is a spirit of Antichrist. And it's going to be, and it's alive and well since 2,000 years. Hallelujah. Okay.
it's coming fast, and that is they're going to have a complete Islamic takeover of the continent of Europe. And all the analysts are saying it is coming quickly, that Europe is going to be an Islamic continent, and every Christian is going to be what they call a dhimmi. They're going to live as subjects to Islam. They're either going to convert or they're going to pay a tax. And it's coming to Europe. Don't think that it can't happen in America, because it is happening in America. And when I was in, right after San Bernardino, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department asked me to come out and do a leadership seminar for them. I did a half-day leadership seminar, and I sat down and talked to those sheriff's deputies. And I said, are you worried that there are other cells like the one that killed those people in San Bernardino. And they looked at me and they said, you know, those cells are all over America. It's not if it's going to happen again. It's just a matter of when it's going to happen again, because we know they're there and we can't do anything about it. That's a lack of leadership.
I want to ask, because I've seen footage of this. There are, I think, 37 or 38 terrorist training camps in America.
35. Jamal Fukra.
Would y'all explain what, my blood was boiling when I saw this. I couldn't believe it was military activity going on, but maybe any one of you explain to everybody what these terrorist training camps are.
And so Jamaat al-Fukra is what they're called in Pakistan, and they're led by a guy named Sheikh Jilani, who's directly tied with Al-Qaeda at the senior levels. Here in the United States, they're called Muslims of America. So much of the training and some of the funding comes from there. But Sheikh Jilani is the guy that the reporter from the New York Times or Wall Street Journal, Daniel Pearl, went to meet and then was beheaded by Khalid Sheikh Mohammed of Al-Qaeda. So that's Sheikh Jilani, pleasant fellow. And so he sets up the MOA training camps in the United States, the Muslims of America. And for the most part, these camps are black converts, African-American converts, mostly prison converts. And they're not being taken seriously by most of them by law enforcement, although some state and local officials around the country, a few of the camps are being watched because they know it's a threat to their community. Now, not all, to my knowledge, we don't have a good number of how many of the 36 camps are active right now. But the quick story is in the early 1990s, an FBI agent went to the state law enforcement in Colorado, said, we have an issue with a camp in Buena Vista, and here's what they're doing. It's maybe 8 miles outside of Buena Vista, 7 miles, and laid it out. And so then the state and local law enforcement put together a briefing and took it to the FBI leadership with the leadership of the state. And the FBI said, we're not going to do anything about this. Now, those are the words of the state chief investigator who was working with the governor, I think Mr. Romer at the time, if I remember correctly, and the attorney general. And, well, they said, well, we don't want these guys in our state. And the FBI refused to do anything, so they put together a multi-jurisdictional task force and raided the compound in Buena Vista and found exactly what you would expect: weapons, explosives, ammunition, lists of people to be assassinated, evidence that they had targeted the Air National Guard base and other facilities, including power facilities and stuff like that. And yet, to date, that camp, at least from my understanding, is starting to show some more activity, and there's been no FBI investigation. I know Jerry's familiar with at least a couple of the camps where he knows guys work in law enforcement, maybe a number of others, where at the federal level, they're not interested in it. I don't think across the board we're taking this threat seriously. We're treating things like San Bernardino, Orlando, and you see a pattern where the person doing it is mentally deficient. Their parents immediately say, we had no idea, even though we support Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. Can't imagine how this happened. And, our leadership gets on TV, says this has nothing to do with Islam. And by the way, this is on both sides of the political aisle, folks.
Yes,
at the leadership level. Has nothing to do with Islam. Don't look, don't lift up any rocks and look under here. But I think this is a serious problem in these training camps.
And back to the church.
The globalist movement in this country, which I guess back in the early days, it used to be not really, it used to hide itself back in the early days. Back in the days of George Bush is when I really first started looking at it. It was called a New World Order, but it's actually a globalization. And if you looked at the Democratic platform, which we had both platforms on one of our discussions prior, they're available on the website. You can find both of them, the Republican platform and the Democratic platform. And I'm talking about the political platform that the candidates are supposed to, use as their the causes that they believe in. And globalism is absolutely positively a globalization, no borders. Everything Hillary Clinton and the Democrats are working with is 1,000% pro-Muslim international globalization. Don't think for a minute that George Soros in Hungary and who's ever dealing with the elections in the world, and that there's nothing, that they're all connected in a order, a systemic, actually even the UN, and everything about them is about world markets, one world market, one global economy, one global belief system, one global platform. And when you look at this nation being taken apart, just like they did in Europe with this euro, and actually what happened in Europe, you see some of this Britain seceding. That was a great thing, and actually it's also showing how that system is not working, and people are getting wise to this. So just realize that there's key things happening, and this whole thing with Iran and the money and the monetary system is well tied into all this, and you'll see how all the pieces to this puzzle just absolutely look. It's not a secret anymore. They're hiding this in plain sight. So this is not about really Muslim. Muslim is the part of the plan that creates social discord, which amongst discord, the people focus on things and are distracted so that they can be manipulated. This is all part of a globalization manipulation. And you'll see how these pieces fit together. And I don't want to get on for preaching, but it's just amazing if you just opened your eyes for a minute to what else is tied to these things. You'll see that this is the fruit, but it's not the root. The root is globalization. It's every side of the aisle, Republicans and Democrats alike. That's why I'm for Trump, because it's anti-establishment, because the establishment is what is organizing this charade on the American people. And that's where it's coming from. So anyway, I'm going to continue. Does anyone want to add anything to that? Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and continue.
Church, I believe as the church goes, so goes the nation, you know. And General Boykin, I wanted to talk about Chrislam because you've known it firsthand. How many's heard of Chrislam? Can I see your hands? So not the whole auditorium. Can you explain what you've encountered in churches in America and exactly what Chrislam is?
Well, we had this really kind of probably started about 5 years ago. We had some actually very well-known mega church pastors that jumped into this thing called Chrislam, and they said, well, it's just what John said. We all worship the same God. Christianity and Islam, we worship the same God, so let's worship together. And they termed it Chrislam. They brought Muslims into the Christian churches. They read from the Quran. They read from the Bible. If you think for 1 minute that it's the same God, I agree with John. You are woefully behind the power curve. But we had big-time pastors. They got into this other thing called, what was it they called it, John? The dialogue? The interfaith dialogue. The interfaith dialogue. Now, according to the Quran, it is wrong, unauthorized for a Muslim to enter into a dialogue with a Christian or a Jew or any non-believers. Take not Christians and Jews for your friends, for they'll corrupt you, is basically what it says. But you got well-known, and I'm not going to call any names, but you got well-known pastors that jumped into this Chrislam thing. And what they don't understand, or if they do, they don't care, is when you bring Muslims into your church to worship, they consecrate that church as holy ground for Allah.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
This is a dangerous thing that churches and spiritual leaders are doing with this Chrislam.
And I think I'm going to kind of go all over the map tonight because there's so many things I didn't know. Kamal, you've told us that a mosque is not just a place of worship. So what does a mosque really represent in the mind of a Muslim?
The mosque, what's referred to in the old days as rabat, What is a Rabat? Rabat is a conquering place where it's built. It conquered the civilization where Islam is not strong or, great yet. But when the mosque is built, it's an Islamic embassy, represent the Islamic State. So its loyalty, it is not to the country that it's in, it's loyalty to the Islamic State. Number two, it's a parliament in itself. Basically, the imam is in charge, and he will release to the people the understanding, the do's and the don'ts, and how to enter the civilization, and how to put the propaganda, Islamic propaganda, to the people. It's like their TV screen. But when you talk about, what you asked General Jerry about how Chrislam is taking place, the uniqueness of all this, anytime when we are bringing Muslim to a church, that ground is not just holy ground, but it must be conquered. And the conquering way it has to be done is by killing the pastor and taking over his place. Why and how is it happening? They are coming to the place and they're saying, we are poor, we have no friends. It's called the Swedish syndrome. And we have no alliance in here. We need your protection. That's what they come into the pastor. The pastor, by having this father instinct, right away is protecting them. Little by little, they increase him by number from hundreds to thousands. And so therefore, now the pastor is having a service for them in his sanctuary. On Friday, they're reading from the Quran, and if you read the Quran, it's sent hexes, vexes, curses against the Christian and Jews. It declares war on the non-believers, the Christian and Jews. So what happened is they are showing him this moderate Islam versus the radical Islam. And that's what we really need to know. It's the scheme, how they enter in and how they infiltrating. The same thing they're doing with the leadership. And now they are moving into our civilization, specifically the areas that Christianity is really strong, like Texas, North Carolina, and many other places like this.
Can I just add one thing, please? On this, what we're seeing around the country in the United States, what Kamal's talking about is, you may have seen, like they're building $90, $100 million mosques in places like out west or in the middle of nowhere, where there are literally 100 Muslims. And people ask, why would they do that? Well, they're doing that because they're claiming the territory around that mosque, the law of sacred space.
8 square miles.
Around that mosque for Islam, and now all they have to do is occupy it. And if you see how practically they're doing it, literally what they do is they will begin going around the neighborhood with Muslim real estate agents. We've seen it all across the country. And they'll offer people that have lived in their houses for 20, 30 years more money than the value, and they'll keep upping it because most of the money is coming from either Dubai or Saudi Arabia. Most of it's Saudi Arabia, and they'll buy these houses. And once a Muslim moves into that house, a non-Muslim's never going to move into that house. If they move, they're going to sell it to another Muslim off market, which in most places is against county or state code, but no one's charging them because they don't want to offend the Muslim population. So you literally see it from the mosque branching out. They're occupying the homes and stuff around the mosque.
The Muslim don't use banking system, the American banks. They use what's called hawara. Hawara is something behind the banking system. It's behind our, it may be operating out of 7-Eleven or Mechanic Place or any of those front end of the Islamic, stores. Basically, they borrow, monies and what so have you, and the big government are involved. If you are advancing Islamization, there are big money to take that money from those places and advance and apply, and open a mosque or whatever it may be. But what you really need to pay attention to, the most important part is when they build a mosque and they build an Islamic center and they build an Islamic school, what they do, they create a triangle. This triangle, it open up, a vortex to heaven, to the second heaven, which is now they start communicating with their, gods and whatever, demons and what so have you. And so now what happened, when that happens, now they establish what's so-called no-go zone area. And so when we are bringing refugees, the refugees start coming to hide in those no-go zones area, especially those who are in ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab, Al-Nusra, all of them, they come to that place. Why? Because the majority of the imams are radical in their understanding. So therefore, when an imam is teaching, and if he has to teach the truth, there is no moderate imam. There is no moderate, because all of them are radical, unless they are Ahmadiyyin. Ahmadiyyin, they are a unique, chapter of the Muslim that they don't believe the entire Islam, and the Muslim must kill those people because they're an apostates. So therefore, we have to know our enemy and understand their philosophy. When they start opening this, now the no-go zoning is established, and now everybody's going to move in, and they're going to be protected in that no-go zone area.
That's why when you hear every single interview, candid or polls or anything where they try to get information from what we would call loving Muslims, they all concur or bow down or subvent American law and order to Sharia law. Because if they're Muslim and they're preaching and they're going to mosques, they're hearing the word, their word, the truth to them. Not a variation of it. There's only one truth. That's the imam. The imam is the spiritual leader, the head. They're all hearing the same Sharia law. And that's why it's when we talked about having a Muslim president, I think it was Donald Trump, they try to say he was like racist because of the fact that he was talking about a Muslim in government. And you see, it's the thing is that Muslim in and of itself, it's not compatible with America or society, or it's a Muslim is in and of itself solidarity. It's solitude. It's only in and of itself one thing. It's like I was saying this earlier on a different teaching about how, can you imagine like the Japanese, the kids that grow up in that culture, they are like robots. They are part of this. And it's the same thing as a Muslim. It's the actual fabric of their government and religion. It's one. We talk about separation of church and state in the United States. There is no such thing as separation of church and state in the Muslim life. This is one thing. It's all combined. It's one. Muslim isn't a faith. Get that straight. Muslim is a culture. It's a government. It's a religion. It's everything all in one. And it's not compatible with any other. It, by its own representation, it's non-compatible. That's why when we talk about these churches, the coexistence and all these things, no, there's no such thing of coexistence. I live, you submit or die. And Colonel Boykin was talking about a tax and something like that as far as Christians and in the government in Europe. Or let me just say this. If you see, I had some friends that were Catholic that lived in Syria, and they were Syrian. And he tried to tell me there's many Syrian Catholics. I said, well, that's great. But Syrian Catholics and the Syrian people that were Catholic did not live anywhere in Muslim areas that were taken over by Muslims. They lived they had their own world in the world, and it was separate. It's not compatible with the existence of other people. And the people that were Catholic, the women still had to wear covering. How could you be Catholic? It was just not compatible. So this is a deception of the enemy. to even believe that there's some type of a compatibility factor that could be weighed in to this discussion or this argument. And this is what this man here, who's a jihadist, who what do you call it when you converted jihadists? He's telling you, fact, it's not compatible. And this deception, you know, ignorance is bliss. Ignorance will kill you. Ignorance will kill you.
Now, this term cultural jihad, we know when there's a violent jihadist thing, there's bloodshed. What is cultural jihad?
Cultural jihad is when people like me, when we came to the culture, to the American culture, it's a stealth methodology, which is underground. You know, if when 9/11 took place, a lot of American people didn't even understand what Islam, everybody's wondering what is Islam is all about. And they still have not understood what happened. Muslim Brotherhood moved here in 1960, early 60s. And what happened, they are establishing precept upon precept to establish Islamic civilization. The Islamic civilization, it works in a way to move into leadership of the nation, to make a presence in universities and colleges, to make their presence known when you invite them to speak. The invitation to speak, now you made them real. What happened? You have called them that you are equal to us. So they are engaged and they provoke the culture so the culture can establish them in this. So now, like what John said earlier, they have thousands fronts, you know, and those fronts, each one represents something different. And so these people say, we are not them. We are not like them. So it's a deception. But by that time, what happened? They affect your education system. They affect your banking system. They affect your judicial system. They affect your, military. They affect your government. They affect your media. They affect every level of your civilization that now you could not do anything anymore. Why? Because you're going to offend the Muslims, and so therefore they will have to implement what's called the hate crime bill, which is you could not speak against Islam, but Islam can speak against you.
Well, sometimes people think, oh, this is speculation, right? Or it's just not. Well, there was the intelligence report that was done that you, I think, led, General Boykin. But there is either a 4 or a 5-phase plan, I think, that Islam.
John mentioned it earlier. It's called the Explanatory Memorandum. It's found in 2004 in Annandale, Virginia, in the basement of the guy that ultimately it was discovered was the, what would you say, operations officer for the Muslim Brotherhood.
Yeah, and a senior Hamas guy, yeah.
Yeah. And they found this explanatory memorandum. And the book that John was part of writing that book, the book is called Sharia, the Threat. And there's a copy of it in there. And it lays out a 5-phase plan. John mentioned it vaguely earlier. It's a 5-phase plan to take over America. Now, it's broad in nature, but if you look at it, you'll say, holy mackerel, they're doing this. It's unfolding right now. Now, there are more specific plans that they have for how they're going to take over. And as Kamal said, they're going to infiltrate every element of our society, including the church. We have a friend that is a pastor in Chino Hills, California. His name is Jack Hibbs. I don't know, 6,000, 7,000 member church in Chino Hills, California. He had an associate pastor that was a Muslim convert. Turned out the guy wasn't a convert at all. He had been planted there. He'd been planted there in this church, huge mega church that guy had been planted there. They're infiltrating every element of our society while we are trying to believe that there is a big separation between the radical Muslims and the moderate Muslims. And the reality is, John said it, the moderate Muslims are just simply Muslims that have chosen not to follow the teachings of the Quran and the Hadith. And there are a lot of them. And God bless them. Wish that more of them would refuse to follow it.
Yeah, I'd like to just, what Jerry's talking about is huge here. Among the documents that we found in 1991, this explanatory memorandum was written and published by the number 2 guy in the Muslim Brotherhood's Palestine Committee, which is Hamas in the United States. And it was a memorandum that was given to the leadership of the Muslim Brotherhood in North America as the strategy to how to deal with North America. Well, that next year, they published their implementation manual, which implements the strategy. And so what we have done, and a colleague of ours did, is we looked at the number of nonprofit Islamic organizations created and the year they were created, and we mapped it against their doctrine. So you see very few being created, and in 1982, 83, a whole slew of them, over 100 created by the Muslim Brotherhood, and then the number drops back down. Well, that's the very year that they created the Islamic Society of North America, which is the umbrella organization for every organization they created from the 1960s to that day. So we call that in the intelligence and law enforcement world an investigative clue that those are all hostile organizations, because it's mapped right against the creation of their continental organization, Islamic Society of North America, which, by the way, the subsidiary of that here is called the Islamic Society of Colorado Springs. Maybe you've heard of it. But anyway, not to get on a tangent, then we see the numbers come down again, literally below 12 or 11 a year, until they publish the explanatory memorandum and the implementation manual. And since that time in 1992, they've created between 70 and about 120 nonprofits a year. And you can see across the board, it's what he's saying: media organizations, legal organizations, civil organizations, social organizations, which, by the way, is exactly what the Muslim Brotherhood bylaws tell them how to do it. So when you look at their plans and what they're actually doing at the ground level, it is absolutely right in line.
You know, go ahead, come on.
There's a book out there we have on a table. It's called Star Spangled Sharia. Star Spangled Sharia is the Sharia, the Islamic Constitution, Pastor, that is going to replace the American Constitution. And what John and General Jerry did, creating a memorandum, creating a B2 report on this, on Sharia. Today we have it in that Star Spangled, and we also have another book called Sharia Law for Non-Muslims. If you want to understand what the Muslim Brotherhood and Islamization, how they're invading our culture, you need to obtain that, because that will give you clarity of understanding, and it's deeper. And I wish we had more time to go as deep as we can.
Go ahead, John.
And one last thing, 2 summers ago, they created the U.S. Council of Muslim Organizations, which I've got to tell you, I've been doing this since really 2002 on the Muslim Brotherhood inside and outside the FBI. And I got to tell you, just the last 6 months of what they're doing it's impressive. And I'm sorry if that sounds glowing, but I mean, they are steamrolling us at the political level. It's the first Muslim political organization in the United States, and it is being run by the most senior Muslim Brotherhood leaders in the U.S. And it is phenomenal, and our political system is allowing it and supporting it in some cases.
You can see it's 36 minutes in, so if you want to finish listening to this, you can grab it somewhere else online, obviously. I have it also on YouTube. Unless, I would say, hey, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, we could stay watching this for a couple of hours till it's over. It's another, about 30 minutes. But unfortunately, I have a commitment that I'm going to have to leave, but I'll leave it running in the background if you guys want to stay on it. But the thing about it,
off when you get off.
I'm sorry?
It shuts off when you get off.
No, I won't get off is what the thing is. I'm just going to end the recording, and I'll let the recording only be an hour. but I'll leave it playing in the back. But the one thing I want to say is there's a video right on where he left off, and this is about what we are allowing to happen in this country as far as Muslims. And I want to just go to my adoring Facebook page because it's never ceases to amaze me how United States and Americans can be so naive and still breathe.
How did we get here? I mean, I'm so angry right now. I can't even tell you how angry I am.
Oh, let me just say, and again, this is what we talked about, and when we prayed in the beginning, I wanted you to understand that there could be a lot of fear associated with some of these things. There should be a righteous anger, though. There absolutely needs to be a righteous anger to this. And the one thing about it is that we, as Americans, just miss it on so many levels because of our. Let me tell you this. I had arguments about presidential candidates when we had 18 Republicans trying, or 17 Republicans trying to be nominated, and we had these, and all these people were just looking for Ted Cruz.
Home security shouldn't stop at the front door. And with
charismatic candidate, and I had arguments with people saying, "Listen, they were mad because Trump was even there, and they had nothing, no person of value to choose from. They were angry." I says, well, what do you do for the past 4 years in being a part of what it means to use your money to fight against, use your connections and do you even know who your local and state representatives are? Do you know who your senators are? It takes effort. Americans are too busy. They don't want to spend time and take the effort, but they can be very angry. And I'm one of them. I was on that list. And that's why I now give on a regular basis to the American Center for Law and Justice, and it's ACLJ. I have them on there because why? Because they're the ones on the front line fighting Roe versus Wade since the beginning. They're the ones at the courtroom steps fighting for Israel. They're the ones visiting the UN. What's going on? And if we don't have people doing something about this, then we don't have a voice. And the thing is that we could use our money to be a voice. And I think it's important that we recognize that because there are agencies, institutions, and places you can't look. What do I know about politics? How am I going to stop the Muslim Brotherhood? They see me, they probably think I'm a member. I don't know anyone in the Muslim Brotherhood or get in there. But, there are people that are actively watching on legal standards. Look, did you know that in 9/11, right after, there's a big mosque where downtown Manhattan? Don't you think that's going to be? Look, the financial district is their money now because they just took it from the infidel. And that's all that they want is Wall Street. So they got it. I mean, look, this is just there. But let's take a look at this because this is right now. Hillary Clinton. This is her. This is her friend.
I'd like to choke her. I really would. I would like to.
How do these people get where they are?
And continue to stay there.
Yeah.
To the American people.
For 30
Who
years.
is Huma Abedin? What do we know about Hillary Clinton's #1 aide and sidekick for 20 years? Hillary spoke at Huma's wedding saying, "If I had a second daughter, it would be Huma." This presidential election decides who gets to run the most powerful country on earth, so it is obviously very important to understand the facts about Huma Abedin, as she may very soon become Chief of Staff in the White House. I'll be simplifying an intricate web of people, organizations, and events that unraveled over many years. All of this information and more is available online for anyone who has access to Google. Anyway, here is an unbelievable story of infiltration unfolding before our eyes, and the most important aspect of this election that you definitely won't see on CNN. There are four main players in this: Hillary Clinton, Huma Abedin, Abdullah Omar Nassif, and Saudi Arabia. Huma was born in the USA. Then when she was 2 years old, her family moved to Saudi Arabia. They lived in Saudi Arabia for 16 years. Huma returned to the USA when she was 18 to study at George Washington University. Only after 2 years in the country, she became an intern for Hillary Clinton, and soon after started working full-time. Also in 1996, Huma was working at her family business, a journal by the Institute of Muslim Minority Affairs. The Abedin's family business is owned by the Muslim World League, Saudi Arabia's global organization that promotes violent Wahhabi Islam. They even share an office at 46 Goodge Street, London. Saliha Abedin, Huma's mother, and Hassan Abedin, Huma's brother, currently work there still. Abdullah Omar Nassif is one of the founders of the Muslim World League and served as vice president of the Saudi Kingdom Shura Council. He created Huma's family business along with her father. He also funded Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden, as did Saudi Arabia, for many years. His organization was declared guilty of funding Al-Qaeda terrorism by the USA State Department. During the Holy Land Foundation trial in 2001, the FBI discovered that the Muslim Brotherhood gave over $12 million to Hamas, the terrorist organization. They also found the secret 18-page plan for the Muslim Brotherhood, which explains that their work in America is a kind of grand jihad in eliminating and destroying Western civilization from within. This document is available online in full. One of the many listed organizations within the Muslim Brotherhood was the Muslim Students Association, which Huma was an executive board member on for 3 years. Only 2 years after Huma left, Anwar al-Awlaki, the Al-Qaeda member and preacher to 9/11 hijackers, became chaplain of the same Muslim Students Association that Huma was a part of. To make things worse, Huma's mother, Saliha Abedin, is a leading member of the Muslim Sisterhood, the women's division of the Muslim Brotherhood. All of these organizations share the same goal and tell us repeatedly in plain English. They want to destroy Western civilization and replace our laws with oppressive Sharia law like you see in Saudi Arabia. On 9/11, Abdullah Omar Nassif, Saudi Arabia, and Al-Qaeda tried to do just that. Where was Huma that day? The top funders of the 9/11 attacks created Huma's family business. Huma was officially working for the terrorists and Hillary Clinton the day those towers fell. Huma Abedin has never come forward with any information about her Saudi co-workers. Absolutely none of Huma's connections were mentioned by her during the investigations into 9/11. She has made no mention of her relationship to Abdullah Omar Nassif, the Muslim World League, Muslim Brotherhood, or her current status at her family business, which could be of unimaginable assistance to the FBI and the CIA. Huma's mother still works for the Muslim World League, yet Huma has made no effort to distance herself from her mother or her radical views. Saliha Abedin is a leading Sharia activist who has, for example, published a book called Women in Islam that claims secular man-made laws enslave women. It supports female genital mutilation, the death penalty for leaving Islam, the legal subordination of women, and the participation of women in violent jihad. Hillary Clinton has flown to meet with Saliha Abedin many times. Huma says that her mother considers her to be a big deal and is proud of her. Huma's absolute silence on all questions regarding her extremist ties says far too much. How can someone with such close links to terrorism be allowed access to our top secret information and have security clearances? Especially since it was found that Huma was accessing Hillary Clinton's emails and physical documents. The Clinton Foundation received over $25 million from Saudi Arabia, and they also funded 20% of her election campaign. Saudi Arabia's massive influence on the Clintons and Obama administration has not gone unnoticed. The damaging results of Islamist influence on the USA and Europe is worthy of another dedicated report, as this is just the tip of the corrupt iceberg. But you can no longer deny that Hillary Clinton is actively working with a global movement whose goal is to destroy Western civilization, just for the selfish benefit of money and power. Humor is the previously hidden link between the Clintons and Saudi terrorism. Dozens of other people and organizations were left out of this for length. Any rational person should have high standards of evidence for claims such as this. So here is the fastest way to prove Humor's tie to Abdullah Omar Nassif that you can look up for yourself and is sourced by their own websites. Start at the website of Humor's family business, the Institute of Muslim Minority Affairs. See that Humor's mother, Saliha, and Humor's brother, Hassan, currently manage this company. Now go to the website for the Muslim World League, owned by Saudi Arabia and Abdullah Omar Nassif. Note the address is listed by their website, 46 Goodge Street, London. Now, back to Humor's family business. If you scroll down, you see that same address, 46 Goodge Street, London. Clearly, anyone can prove in seconds that Humor's family business is owned by Saudi Arabian terrorists. Their own websites make no secret of this fact. There are no more excuses for Humor's silence. She has had years of opportunities to distance herself from terrorists and radical views, but would rather simply hide. The American people demand an explanation from Huma Abedin and Hillary Clinton before the election. One simple, straightforward question needs to be answered. Did Abdullah Omar Nassif create your family business, and were you working with him in any capacity on September the 11th, 2001? Yes or no? This year marks the 15th anniversary of the day Al-Qaeda murdered 3,000 innocent citizens. Let's not forget about it so quickly. Huma's security clearances should be revoked until she or Hillary directly address this national security threat. Unfortunately, in the meantime, because of the overwhelming silence and lies, it appears to be true that a vote for Hillary Clinton will be a vote for Huma Abedin, the Muslim Brotherhood, Saudi Arabia, Al-Qaeda, and a wish for the complete destruction of the United States of America.
Why isn't this all over TV? Why isn't it on YouTube?
Mainstream media is pretty much sold out. I mean, there is no such. I mean, mainstream media is just as much a part of this.
You can tell that by when Trump is speaking, they got him in a box this big, and they won't even show how many supporters are in there. Where Hillary is speaking, they're showing everybody around. You know, I honestly believe, like King David, that Trump is being groomed by God to take this over. I honestly do.
Well, we're just gonna right now, the writing's on the wall. We know we can't say we don't have a clue or an idea. Now, what do? Something as easy as just voting. Something as easy as just speak it out in your local community. Something as easy as just standing up for it on Facebook. Something as easy as just not turning a blind eye to real things as a Christian, and realizing that you have a responsibility. You have a responsibility to influence your society. It's a mandate for Christians. So,
I have never had a problem speaking out. That's not something that I have a problem with.
Well,
I have the knowledge first, you know.
Hallelujah. And that's why I believe it's important for us to break the silence. Continue listening to this. I have to go. It's 8:15 already, past 8:15. I'm going to go ahead and just stop the recording so that I can keep it the size I want it to be for the